Hey there, welcome to the Startup Leader Show, where we learn lessons from leading startup founders and executives. I'm your host, Lisa Dreher, and I'm really excited to introduce Brent Canfield. He is the founder and CEO of a company called Smart Digital Security. Hey, Brent, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us today. Can you maybe give our audience a little bit of background about Smart Digital and what you do?
Yeah, Smart Digital is a security company. We focus on security practices, really focus heavily on commercial, industrial, uh, and residential type of security.
Got it. Got it. So, in terms of, business security, what are some of the things that you're seeing right now that are maybe changing, perhaps because of just the changes in the way we're working?
I think right now, obviously, with the temperature of the water around the country, we see a little bit of uptick in security in regard to protecting yourself. There's a it's like the rising tide with ships, right? So when people are walking to their car, there's the crime rates increase. I think everyone can agree in the last 10 years we've seen an uptick in active shooters, unfortunately. But in large, the security industry continues to accelerate a little bit, uh, just because people want to better protect themselves. They want to protect their facilities.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What do you see as some of the biggest challenges to, I guess, implementing and rolling out these security and surveillance solutions today?
Really, the largest challenge, Lisa, is it's like practices and things that I learned, early on as a Marine. They always say terrain dictates. Well, in the security industry, uh, the 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 facility is always different in every environment. So the real challenge is how do you protect that facility, whether it comes down to ingress egress routes, or entry exit areas, or how the facility is laid out. You have to plan for all that.
Right, right. So when you're looking at, I guess we have a lot more remote workers nowadays too. Does that change the way you're implementing the solutions or thinking about that? Because you're talking about people coming and going, maybe at odd times that aren't typical.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to change the dynamics of you know the behavior patterns of people, right? And how people typically travel to and from work. A lot of remote workers now, so a lot of people are not traveling as much. And even you know people, I think, right now are trying to decide whether it's worth it to travel because of the restrictions that there are across the country.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now you have a solution called Sentry Pods, right? And so is that different from the standard security or surveillance solutions that you're doing? How is that used?
Yeah, Sentry Pods are, basically, we designed them. They're basically an autonomous camera system, Lisa. Sentry Pods are designed to be installed and accessible in 3 to 5 minutes max. And so it's a very commercial, industrialized camera system that has redundancy and autonomy built into the design.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, we wanted to invite you here today to talk a little bit about some of the lessons that you've learned in the development and growth of Smart Digital. So maybe we can start with you telling us a little bit about the biggest keys to your success so far.
I mean, that's a lot of things, Lisa. I think dynamically as an entrepreneur, fundamentally you have to know a lot of things, right? And so there's a reason why there are college courses and programs, master's programs on starting a business. I got my education from the School of Hard Knocks, like many entrepreneurs. Uh, but I was blessed because I used all the principles that I learned in the Marine Corps and basically converted that experience into entrepreneurship by knowing how to write In the Marine Corps, we would write a 5-paragraph order for an operations order. In business, that just translates to a business plan. You have to write a very intuitive business plan on how you plan to fully execute this business, what your go-to-market strategy is, how are you going to grow capital and raise capital and grow your business. And so fundamentally, it's a lot of putting the work in. You've got to put the work in if you want to be successful. You can't, if from the moment you decide to be an entrepreneur, it's no longer a day job. It's no longer an 8 to 5 or a 9 to 5. It's many hours a day if you want to win. And so it's survival of the fittest.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When you talk about a plan, have you noticed that, or have you experienced where you've needed to shift gears or change plans, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I would say that's a constant need in running a business. You have to consistently evolve. You have to consistently pivot and change and be willing to adapt. Again, another great feature that I learned as a Marine, you have to adapt to your environment in all cases. In the Marine Corps, they teach a program called the Combat Hunter Program, in which I'm literally in the middle of writing security doctrine right now. But in the Combat Hunter Program, you have to measure your kinesics and measure your proxemic push or pull in any environment you're in. You have to read that environment. And so it's the same in business, right? It just translates, and you have to study your customer. You have to know your customer before you get into the meeting. You don't learn about your customer when you're in the meeting. You learn about the customer before you get there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, kind of thinking about how things have changed over time as you've been growing Smart Digital, what would you say has been the most valuable business lesson you've learned over the years?
I think the most valuable business lesson for me is to have known my numbers earlier and known that, you have to know your numbers. You have to know what your goal is, what your short-term goal is, what your long-term goal is. Many lessons, obviously, but the one that sticks out to me the most is definitely know your numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some of the key numbers that you track in your business?
All of them. Yeah, I mean, I want to know where my P&L's at. I want to know how my balance sheet is loaded up. Your balance sheet is basically all your assets. What the term EBITDA means.
Yeah.
I want to know what my year-to-date sales are. I want to know what my weekly sales are. I want to know what my quarterly sales are, and so I know how to measure where we need to land for the projections.
Sure.
So I think that's critical for sure. Is being very in tune with your products, your price, your cost, because there's two money systems in a business: money in and money out. It's a real simple concept. And if you can grasp that and get down to the basics, those are your two things that will make or break you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, kind of going back in time, knowing what you know now, what would you have told yourself in the beginning when you first started?
Uh, Man, a lot of things. It's a lot to be an entrepreneur. I think I would have been more careful about loading myself up with debt in my initial starting phase because, I agree a lot with Mark Cuban. I don't believe in loading yourself up with debt to start a business. I think it's bad. It just stacks on more problems and increases your anxiety and your stress levels because now you have to figure out a way to return all that money.
Yeah.
Unless you've got owner investment, there are many vehicles to starting a business on how you fund it, how you finance it. But if you don't have owner equity from other investors or private investors, you're on your own. And so how do you secure that funding? A lot of people put up their house as collateral for a security agreement. So for me, I think the most valuable lesson for me was not to load myself up with debt initially.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, is that the thing that you would do different if you were to start all over, or is there something else you would do differently?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think I would have done a lot of things differently, Lisa. But the
Yeah.
one thing I think that would have reduced a lot and accelerated us faster The debt wasn't necessarily a bad thing for us, but it prevented us from accelerating at a faster level because we were so inundated with debt that we had to figure out a way to pay all this debt back. And we're over the hill now. We're over 7.5 years in business now. We're moving into year 8. But initially, I think that slowed us up a little bit because we figured out ways to raise capital by getting debt, and so it wasn't. I don't think the benefit far outweighed the risk.
Right. I get it. So since you've been in business for over 7 years now, one of the things that I've heard from a lot of startup leaders is that they kind of hit these plateaus and then they have to figure out how to kind of push past those plateaus. What have you done to push past those plateaus in your business?
That's a super great question. And I think that question needs to be asked to all entrepreneurs, Lisa, because what we did when we hit those plateaus, it's much like bodybuilding and lifting and staying in shape, is we had to streamline our processes. We had to accelerate, and that accelerates your efficiencies when you streamline your processes. You have to, we call it cutting the fat. We have to look around. We have to do a constant analysis on what our core efficiencies are. And so what we did is how we streamlined our processes is we went in, we took on an online portal that manages our business that's tailored to our industry. So for the security industry, we're using an online cloud portal that helps us to not only navigate our finances and where we're at financially, but also our service tickets, our service calls, our invoicing, our billing, our invoicing and billing, but our accounts receivable, our payables. And so by doing that, now we've got the ability to be more efficient because now we've accelerated our capability because we've got the ability for more of our employees, our operations center, that are able to work simultaneously, and there's no real bottleneck or choke point. And that's another struggle with businesses is people have a hard time with identifying what their bottleneck is. And a bottleneck is basically what we call a choke point. It's a single point of failure. And if you don't remove those bottlenecks and those choke points, you're really causing your business to struggle, drown, or bleed out because you've got single points of failure all over the place that if one catastrophic thing happens, it could crush your business.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's a really good point. And I think it's really important also. So if you could make one prediction about the future of business or perhaps security, what would that be?
So for me, I watch a lot of other entrepreneurs, big fans of a lot of them. One that sticks out to me is a man by the name of Marcus Lemonis. A lot of people know who he is. People like Mark Cuban. Marcus Lemonis is much like Warren Buffett. He doesn't like technology a lot. He doesn't like to invest too much in technology. That's one area where I disagree with Marcus Lemonis because I really believe that technology is always evolving. Here's the thing that helps you win with technology. You've got to know technology and follow it very closely to be able to predict its success or failure rate. And so it's predictive analysis, and technology is always evolving. And so the one thing that I could say that I could predict about the future is technology is always going to lead the way because you've got intuitive people, you've got thought leaders, you've got disruptors in every industry that are looking for ways to accelerate their efficiencies, their capabilities, and the dynamics of their competitiveness by using technology. And I think that technology is always going to lead the way when it comes down to aggressive growth. Now, will technology be able to stand, a bottle of Coke in the long run? I don't know. A bottle of Coke always seems to be a good investment when it comes to stock or even just the product itself or a bottle of Pepsi. But by and large, technology is always more aggressive in the growth strategy. I mean, look at companies right now like Tesla. I mean, this guy stood against all the odds. Everyone doubted him, and look where Elon Musk is at right now with Tesla. It's another representative of the technology industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And SpaceX too, right?
yeah, that's a whole nother animal. But yeah, SpaceX. I mean, that's probably a bigger story, Lisa. So that's a great point.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of people that thought they couldn't do it, and now look at what they've done in terms of the commercialization of space. It's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I really want to thank you for joining me here today. And if these predictions that you've made come true, we'll go ahead and bring you on the show again, and we'll talk about how those things have changed and how they've impacted business.
Yeah.
In any case, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lisa.